Will Jacob Chychrun be the first blockbuster deal of 2022? Could we see changes in Edmonton, including potential change behind the bench? How will Vegas handle the activation of Jack Eichel? How much salary do they have to move out, or could they have another solution up their sleeves? Plus, is Senators owner Eugene Melnyk broke? There's a significant rumor suggesting that the Sens can't operate without fans and that money is a lot tighter than we've ever heard before. All that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a lot of significant news and rumors to talk about here today. Before we jump into some of the more bigger items, a couple of quick items here. First up on the waiver wire, we had James Neal of the St. Louis Blues on waivers yesterday, and surprisingly, he has indeed cleared. I really thought a team would take a chance on him. He's on a one-year veteran deal, league minimum salary. Hasn't had a great year, but he's put up 4 points, 17 games. Has a long history of performing much better at the NHL than he has recently, including a lot of playoff experience before as well. I thought given the situation many teams are facing with COVID protocols and the fact that we actually have the taxi squads returning, that somebody would take a chance on him. But that's telling to show how the other 31 NHL general managers feel about James Neal as a potential option they could pick up for free on a league minimum salary. So they have the option of reassigning him now. I believe they're putting him on the taxi squad for right now. Part of that move was also due to the fact that Braden Shannon was ready to be activated and come back off IR. So that's certainly playing a role here as well in their roster decision. We also have news from the New York Islanders. The head coach Barry Trotz is going to be away from the team for a period of time, taking in a personal leave of absence is what they're calling it. Of course, because of that, due to privacy, we really don't know much about the situation. So certainly hope it's nothing serious or health related, but clearly there's some kind of personal matter that will remain private, at least for the time being, that he will not be there. No exact time frame has been given, but obviously his assistant coaches will have to kind of pick up the slack here and take over for him while he's gone from the team. So we certainly hope everything is okay, for the family, health-wise, there's all kinds of things that it could be. We don't know, so there's no point in really speculating. Just hope he makes a return here in the near future and that everything is okay here in the end. Now, when it comes to the schedule, Elliot Friedman and Jeff Merrick talking about this on the 32 Thoughts segment on Hockey Night in Canada this past weekend, as well as the podcast that came out earlier today, talking about how the NHL plans to make up the postponed games, especially amongst the Canadian teams who've been hit the hardest here, because some of those games that were canceled, as we know, are not strictly due to the COVID issues. A lot of it's to do with capacity issues, which essentially is kind of COVID related, but it's not as a direct relation to not being able to put a full roster on the ice and being short players. A lot of them are being postponed because of the fact that they can't have fans or very little fans in the building, and they want to wait and play those games at a later date if they can to order to make more money off the ticket gate, which certainly makes a lot of sense. At the same time, a lot of these arenas with limited capacity also not allowed to have any of their concessions open, and obviously that takes a blow financially as well. So it's certainly all around a bad situation. So what Friedman and America have talked about here is that we may only see games postponed up until about the middle of January. After that, they really don't have the option to continue doing that strictly due to capacity issues. Now, if a team in Canada or elsewhere for that matter can't really, put a full team on the ice and they have too many players out due to COVID-related stuff, positive tests and all that, then we're likely still going to see postponements and teams shut down for periods of time here and there. But for right now, beyond January the 16th, if you do the math, there's only so many games you can make up during that period of time on a schedule that was blocked off for the Olympic break and the All-Star break. Some of these teams are not really going to be able to get a chance to get really any time off because they've had so much time off already. So they're probably going to end up playing right through it, playing 4 games a week. So if you look at it, Friedman said basically what he was told by the league is to basically just do the math. And if the season wants to end at the appropriate time that they have scheduled for right now, there's just no way around it. So don't look for games to be postponed due to capacity issues beyond the middle of January. After that, if they're able to play with no fans, they may not have a choice but to do so. The game that took place Saturday night between the Leafs and the Senators, because the Leafs were the home team, apparently they were given a choice. They could either play or not play. Obviously, the Leafs are a team with deep pockets, so they chose to go ahead. Obviously, the financial loss impacts everybody, but not as much to them as some other teams that we'll talk about here momentarily. And at the same time, they were also concerned about the possibility of, just having more games to make up later, having a longer stretch of time without games and all that, which is certainly something you want to factor in here as well. I know some teams and some players seem to be getting frustrated with the growing number of games that have been postponed. So we'll see. We may have to see more games with no fans in attendance here as we get further on into the season. Let's just hope those restrictions don't have to last too long. But right now, things seem to be getting worse before they're going to get better in many of the Canadian provinces. Now, speaking of which, and being able to play without fans, let's take now to the Ottawa Senators. We talked yesterday about the ownership change rumor that's been circulating. I know I personally have seen it from at least two different sources. Each of those claim to have one legit source that the team is, potentially for sale. With the negotiations, I should say, taking place between a group headlined by Daniel Alfredson and Chris Phillips, two former players, two guys that have their numbers in the rafters with the Sens, the two guys with the most games played in Sens history, along with at least a third party, and probably which would likely be a group of investors to make up the rest of the ownership stake in the money. Obviously, we talked about the fact that the Sens need a new arena, move downtown. Melnyk's been, I guess what you'd call a cash-strapped owner for some time, even though publicly he won't really admit that. But we've seen the arena deal fall through. About 5 years ago, they were supposed to have a new arena opening now, and they haven't even broken ground. There's no deal in place. Obviously, his ability to deal with local government and get a deal in place at LeBreton Flats was obviously fell short. A lot of people don't seem to like working with him for reasons that we've discussed numerous times here on the channel. But now there's concerns that maybe he's actually more cash-strapped than we ever really knew, and that could he actually be broke at a point where they're having trouble making payroll. There's a rumor, and we're going to stress here, this is strictly rumor, not confirmed. I'm going to show you a post here that came from Senators Reddit. Obviously, Reddit can be a great source, but it's an unconfirmed source. But it does make some sense based on everything else we've heard and all the rumblings and rumors over the past couple of weeks. I know the Senator ownership thing, we talked about it in the video yesterday. The first time I had heard about that more recently was a couple of weeks ago, but I held off talking about it on the channel, just trying to see if we can get more sources to kind of cite more reference here. And like I said, there was even talks a while back. I think it was Wayne Scanlon who had an article a little bit before that one. So it's been something that's been ongoing for some time. Like I said, a lot of it seemed to be focused around the fact that once the season got going and the Kraken were in on this 32nd team, of course, we're going to see franchise values come up. We saw the new Forbes list go out not long ago. We've seen some other teams also change ownership, like the Pittsburgh Penguins being sold to the Fenway Group. So that's obviously, again, that's going to boost everybody up a bit in value, because we just seen a fairly high-profile hockey team change ownership, right? So typically, like I mentioned, I wouldn't be surprised if other owners see that and go like, geez, maybe it's a good time here with franchise values being at all-time highs. If you look at the fact that they've had so much lost revenue because of the pandemic in the past 2 years, it's an intriguing concept. Maybe it's a way to cash out, make a good profit, and move along, and let some other people with potentially even deeper pockets come in and take over. And that could be a situation that we see here with the Senators. I mean, the Senators have had other groups be interested in the past. It's not the first time. Like I said, the Senators are not in a situation where they're really at risk to move, because there's been other groups that have been interested in buying them and keeping them there. But I think a lot of it just has to do with the fact that nobody's really made Melnyk an offer that he was really willing to accept. He's been pretty stubborn to get the price he wants. And that's just what we've heard around the rumblings around him for some time. But this piece here from Reddit indicates that before here at the end of December, the checks were bouncing for staff. So that's not a good scene. And that the fact is that with no fans in attendance, they may not be able to operate, because obviously the bunch of money comes in from the tickets. That covers, all their expenses to kind of keep going, pay their employees, etc. Now, apparently there's been some promises to make sure they're paid on time appropriately for the next payroll time and all that. And we'll see legitimately how much truth there is to this. We probably will be able to confirm this within a few weeks' time, because like I said, by middle of January, it's a real possibility they may not have a choice but to play home games with no fans. And if they can't, well, then we'll know that soon enough if it's indeed, more truth to it. And I'm sure that this is going to gain more traction or either be either verified or at the same time, be verified to be untrue in the near future. But consider what we talked about yesterday and all the rumors around the ownership. I found it interesting that came to light here today. That it just really makes things look extremely bad, and you can't help but wonder if maybe the Senators' rumor on the ownership change is pretty legit, and if we might actually see this come to be and Melnyk sell the team to the former players and whoever they're aligned with here from the investment side of things. So we'll have to watch this story. I think it could be one of the bigger ones to keep an eye on here in 2022, especially in the next few weeks if they're forced to play with no fans in the building. Now, we do need to pause for a moment and to acknowledge our channel sponsor, Manscaped. Top Shelf Hockey is proud to be sponsored by Manscaped. And guess what? Hockey fans are buzzing because hockey is back. Want to know what else is buzzing? The Lawnmower 4.0 from our friends at Manscaped, who are the global leaders in male grooming, trusted by over 2 million men worldwide. I highly recommend the Performance Package 4.0, which includes their new state-of-the-art Lawnmower 4.0, as well as some other great features. The lawnmower itself has a 7,000 RPM motor, a new multifunction switch that can engage as a travel lock, gives you the ability to turn on an LED spotlight as well for a more precise shave. Also, as I've mentioned on numerous occasions before, Manscaped is about much more than just a trimmer. They have everything, all aspects covered in male grooming, including some great formulations like their brand new ultra premium body wash to keep you smelling great all day long. It's certainly a big hit here. I absolutely love it. They also have other exfoliators and gels to keep all aspects of your grooming needs covered. I highly recommend you check out manscaped.com. Use promo code TSH for 20% off and free shipping. That's 20% off and free shipping at manscaped.com using promo code TSH. So thanks very much for watching that promotional content. I do greatly appreciate it. Back to the rest of the video here. We do want to take a look at some trade talk around the NHL. Could we see Jacob Chychrun be the first blockbuster deal of 2022? Well, according to Elliot Friedman in the latest 32 Thoughts podcast, he believes that's a real strong possibility. I mean, back to last time they mentioned Chychrun, he was talking about the fact that he believed the Coyotes were, entertaining conversations and that he was no longer an untouchable. And now he's saying he believes he'll be the first blockbuster deal of 2022. So that's a big difference there in verbiage to me. So that kind of shows that he really thinks Chychrun is going to be traded and traded very quickly. Of course, he's been out injured for some time, should be making a comeback shortly, which obviously, depending on how he plays here, will probably continue to generate interest. So it's certainly an interesting thing to keep an eye on. Now, of course, in today's podcast, he didn't link Chychrun to any specific team, but he did say that he felt the Oilers, from what he's heard, are not involved, even though many feel that he would be the perfect fit there. And we are going to talk a little bit about Edmonton here momentarily as well. And one of their holes that they could use would be another strong left shot defenseman. Well, Chychrun might be that guy, but at the same time, it's probably going to be too costly, and he doesn't feel like they're in the mix. But in the case of Chychrun, considering his age and how much term he has on his contract, I don't necessarily think this has to be a deal that gets done with a team that's pushing for the playoffs. Now, it could, but it doesn't have to be. You could see other teams maybe not in the mix, building for the future, trying to get a deal done in that sense as well. If they feel like this deal might not wait till the offseason, if they don't get in now, they may not have a chance. So, we could even see a guy like Phil Kessel packaged with Chychrun from a Coyotes trade. That wouldn't be shocking either, and see them kind of pull back, another good haul of prospects and picks for the future. I mean, the Coyotes have their own fair share of things to deal with as well when we talk about the Senators, when it comes to, money and the arena and all that. And that's another big story we're going to have to look out for here too in early 2022 as we wait for there to be more decisions on, their long-term projection here for their home. Are they going to get an arena in Tempe? Are they going to, come back and get a last-minute deal to stay in Glendale? How's that all going to work out? Are they going to have to relocate? Certainly something that we're going to watch for. moving forward. Now, when it comes to the Edmonton Oilers, now, of course, they had a real solid start to the year. Many of us pegged them to be a top 3 spot in the Pacific, or pretty much a given here, in likely, even having a good shot at going deep into Western Conference playoffs. Based on how they started, things looked like many people who projected that looked pretty smart. Now, on the other hand, not so much. I mean, we've seen Mikko Koskinen have to carry the ball early on, and then that fizzled. Mike Smith come back from a long-term injury. Has not been great. There's now sitting themselves in a spot where they're like in the second wild card spot, and they're not even guaranteed a playoff spot here anymore. Their record's not horrible, but they're playing the Rangers tonight. If they have another loss, they could slip even further. They get teams like Dallas with some games in hand, coming up behind them that very well could push them out of a playoff spot. And could we see changes? And there's been some talk about a potential even change behind the bench. We've talked before about a goalie change, whether it be a trade to help solidify that position, a left shot D, even a third line center. There's still the same holes in this team that they had last year. Holland made some moves, sure, but he didn't really address the issues, in my opinion, and many people will agree with that. I think it's the same issues over and over and over again. They need another defenseman, they need a goalie, and after McDavid, Draisaitl, down the middle, they're not so strong, in that number 3 spot especially. They've tried Kyle Turris. Ryan McLeod's been okay, but they could use a little bit more experience there to take the pressure off that. They brought in Derek Ryan. That hasn't worked out. They need somebody else in that spot. And, that's a lot to do. So is Holland going to make that move or try to get some of these moves done ahead of the deadline? It's possible, but he's kind of in a situation where it has to be money in, money out. Not a lot of wiggle room. Don't really want to mortgage the future too much. So could there be a change behind the bench instead? Could Dave Tippett maybe be in trouble? There's been some rumors about Ken Holland bringing back a former colleague of his in Mike Babcock. Now, Babcock's a big name, obviously working in university hockey right now in Saskatchewan, still being paid by the Maple Leafs. You have to wonder. Holland was asked about this by Elliot Friedman. They did bring it up in the 32 Thoughts podcast, and he said that he saw Mike Babcock a while back at a game when one of their training staff was being honored because of somebody they were connected to, but he has not spoken to him about any employment opportunities or coaching or doing anything with the Edmonton Oilers. So, to be honest, I wouldn't expect him to confirm anything, even if it were true. He's not going to come out and say, yeah, we've been talking to him, we're thinking about making a change. That's not going to happen. So we got to take that here, with a grain of salt and move on. But at the same time, we know how long those two worked together in Detroit for a long time. Will Babcock want to coach in the NHL again? Some think he does, some think he doesn't. It's just an interesting, one of those people that are certainly quite a mix of views out there. Will he make a return? It's interesting to think about, and you have to wonder with the relationship there, if Holland decides that Tippett has to go and need a change, would he call on him to make an NHL return? We'll have to watch that situation unfold here over the next few weeks. If the Oilers get themselves together, start winning more games, I'm sure those conversations and those rumors are probably all going to go away here. Now, lastly, we want to look at Vegas, of course, with the Jack Eichel activation coming here. Hopefully, in a few weeks' time, they're hoping he'll be able to play by the time the Olympic break would kick in. Of course, that may or may not happen. It may have to wait. Of course, we're not really going to get much of an Olympic break, but that was the original plan when he first had the surgery. Of course, that was still built in, and the players were still planning on going to the Olympics at that point in time. So when Eichel's ready, whether that be end of January, early February, somewhere along those lines, the Golden Knights have a lot of salary that needs to be moved out to make him be able to be activated. So we talked before about Riley Smith or Dadonov being the two most likely names to go to be able to make room. Of course, right now, Pacioretty's a long-term injury reserve. He might be out longer than Eichel is. It just depends. They may be back around the same time. That's not determined as of yet because Pacioretty required wrist surgery, so that's undetermined right now. But could another option present itself besides making a trade? Because besides those guys, you have Marchessault, you have Theodore, you have William Karlsson. Not that any of those names have been necessarily mentioned in trade talk, but those are the types of salaries that we're talking about in order for them to become cap compliant to be able to get Eichel on the roster. Or could there be another way? And that's maybe bringing in a player like Ryan Kesler. Yes, Ryan Kesler is retired for all intents and purposes here. 1 year left on his contract at $6.75 million on long-term injury reserve with the Anaheim Ducks. Would they maybe purchase that contract essentially from the Ducks for a picker prospect going back the other way to increase their LTIR pool and be able to move out less salary to make that work. That would certainly help them bulk up. It's not a contract to be committed to for any length of time, and it very well could work out. I mean, moving Dadonov, to be honest, is probably going to be quite a challenge. As much as Riley Smith is probably not going to be returning to Vegas, I would think cap-wise it's going to be impossible to re-sign him. If they do trade him, I can see him going to the Rangers, but ultimately, Riley Smith might end up staying in Vegas to ride things out. They're going to want to go forward, and they're not going to want to, reduce the amount of players that they don't have to, right? So this might be a way. We know that they're not afraid to spend, and this essentially spends more money out of their pocket, but at the same time, it gets the deal done. And could there be more of a deal even, really, with Kessler? If you look at the Anaheim Ducks, they've got some significant players there that are pending UFAs, and even though they were a surprise team this year, will a guy like Ryan Getzlaf maybe be moved to the deadline? Will the Ducks remain in a playoff spot? There's all those question marks we don't know because there's so much hockey left to play. But at the same time here, there's a lot of interesting things to think about with Lindholm and Manson and Raquel, Getzlaf being the names out there that could be moved if they're not heading for the playoffs. You have to wonder if Vegas might be in the mix there, because I know last year they were one of the few teams that were entertaining bringing in Ryan Getzlaf as well. So that's another possibility. We could see maybe some kind of a package deal. Maybe Anaheim does take one player back in exchange for Kessler, Getzlaf, or something to that effect. Hard to say, but we could see Vegas go that route. It's been mentioned now in a few different reports, including Jesse Granger covering the Golden Knights here for The Athletic in a recent article suggesting that theory, and it very well might be onto something. We wouldn't be surprised at all to see them spend to try to get themselves that elusive Stanley Cup, especially with the tight cap situation that they have. So let me know your thoughts on anything discussed here today down below in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to this channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news, rumors, and analysis on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.